Hello and welcome to the JSA studio. I am your host, as always, Nathan, and today we're going to be looking at the AFC South and their draft classes. Sorry that this is a week late. I had to pick up a couple of extra shifts, so that's why there was no video last week. That being said, I am going to have to ask you to like, comment, and subscribe if you end up enjoying the content in this video. And now with the intro done and out of the way, let's go ahead and jump right into it. Starting off with the Houston Texans. Now, the Texans did not have a first-round pick. They ended up trading back before draft day even started with the Minnesota Vikings. Generally speaking, I'm not a big fan of trading out of the first round, but I'm not really going to take that into account when grading these players or the draft class as a whole. So let's go ahead and run through the grades here. At 42nd overall in the second round, you guys selected Kamari Lassiter, a cornerback out of Georgia. I gave that grade a B minus as I had a top 75 grade on Kamari Lassiter. So you took him in the top 50. That is a tier above. So the grade is a B minus. Your second round pick, 59th overall, was Blake Fisher, an offensive tackle out of Notre Dame. Now, I had a top 100 grade on Blake Fisher. You took him inside what I would refer to as the top 75 tier. Again, another slight reach. That grade is a B minus. However, we sort of right the ship here with Kalen Bullock, the safety out of USC. I had a top 50 grade on him. You got him outside of the top 75. That is a 2-tier value. That grade is an A minus. However, day 3 kind of goes down the drain here a little bit, as you can see through the grades. I had a 6th round grade on Cave Stover. You took him in the 4th round. That's a pretty big reach for me. That grade is a C. In the 6th round, you selected Jamal Hill, a linebacker out of Oregon. I had a priority undrafted free agent grade on him. That is a C+. At the 6th round, 205th overall, you selected Jawar Jordan, a running back out of Louisville. Even though I do kind of like the player, I also had a priority undrafted free agent grade on him. So again, taking him in the 6th round, that grade is a C+. Solomon Byrd, an edge rusher out of USC, I did not have a grade on him heading into this, so he doesn't have a grade here. He doesn't help or hurt the process in terms of grading the overall draft class. Your second 7th round pick, Marcus Harris, an interior defensive lineman, probably a 3 technique out of Auburn. I actually had a 6th round grade on him. So that is a pick after value. So that is a B+. And 7th round selection, Ladarius Henderson, an interior offensive lineman out of Michigan. He played tackle in college. He will be a guard at the next level if he sticks around. But I did have a draftable grade on him. I did have a 7th round grade on him. So that selection is graded as a B. Now that we've kind of run through all of the grades here, let's go back and talk about some of the more interesting picks. Starting with Kamari Lassiter, I do think he's very likely to start day 1, if not day 1, very early on in the process. I do think that he is someone who has upside as a corner 2. I don't particularly see upside beyond being a solid number 2 corner in the NFL, which is why I was not on board with him in the 1st round. Now, he didn't go in the 1st round, but he was getting talked about throughout this draft process as a pseudo 1st round kind of guy, and I was definitively not on board with that. But he has good size. He's definitely an outside corner, technically sound. Georgia does corners very well. I think this is a high floor prospect with maybe a slightly limited ceiling. However, it does fill a need, in my opinion, that this team had, and I think it's a good overall scheme fit. Your second round selection, Blake Fisher, was a little bit of a head scratcher for me. I did not have him graded this high, A, but B, there were also several other players at that offensive tackle position, even on the right side, because we know you're set at left tackle, but even on the right side, that I probably would have preferred over Blake Fisher here, even if it was more of somebody who's just an athlete, or would have to even flip to the opposite side, like Kingsley Suamataia or Kieran Amegdije out of Yale. And those are both guys that probably wouldn't have helped you right away. However, I will say that Blake Fisher, I think, can come in and play right away. I had him graded lower than both of those players that I mentioned here, but that's probably just because I am more of a traits and upside guy rather than like a technically sound guy who may or may not have a relatively limited amount of upside. And when you're talking about players outside of the first round, you're usually only getting one or the other. You're either only going to get someone who's going to be able to play and contribute right away, or someone with a lot of upside. You're typically not going to get both outside of the first round. And you guys chose someone who, in my opinion, is never going to be a Pro Bowl caliber offensive tackle, but I do think is someone who is going to be a stalwart right tackle in this league for a fairly long period of time. I do think he could play right away if you want him to as well. However, because of my personal draft philosophy, I'm just more willing to take the risk on a player with more upside than Blake Fisher, in my opinion. So there were just a lot of other players I would have rather have seen you guys take than Blake Fisher. But that's just me, and what do I know? It's the name of the channel. I'm just some asshole. Now, your third round selection, Kalen Bullock, this was an excellent pick. I think it fills a sneaky need for this team because you don't really have that do-it-all, can kind of play everywhere safety, and that's what Kalen Bullock is. He's going to probably be a guy that's going to have 350 snaps in the box, 150 snaps in the slot, and 200 snaps at a deep safety, like a free safety or a split safety sort of look. He's going to be someone that you move around a whole lot, and he's great moving downhill, whether that's rolling in coverage or tackling or jumping in underneath routes. I really, really like Kalen Bullock. And I think that defense with D'Amico Ryans is going to utilize him in the way that I believe he should be utilized. The last player here that I want to spend a little bit amount of time on is going to be Jahar Jordan, the running back out of Louisville. This pick to me is a little bit of a head scratcher. It's not your worst pick. I would have that as Cade Stover, but this one, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me because Jahar Jordan is a power back mainly that does not have NFL size, which is why I did not have a draftable grade on him. I think he might be able to find a role in the NFL, but I don't necessarily think that he's going to be someone that's going to even maybe make the roster year one. He might have to be a practice squad player for a year or two and then potentially crack the running back rotation. I just, philosophically, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I really like Dameon Pierce, and you guys also signed Joe Mixon, and Joe Mixon's, honestly, at this point in his career, not very good. But I still think he can contribute as a rotational running back and just sort of being a veteran presence. But I do think Dameon Pierce probably should be the bell cow running back for this team. And weirdly enough, I kind of think you guys didn't necessarily get him the ball all that much this past year. I'd like to see him get the ball more. He might have been hurt. I don't remember. But he was impressive to me as a rookie, and I think maybe even if he got caught up in the sophomore slump a little bit, I do think that he is going to be a long-term piece at that running back position. And by long-term, I mean for like 2 or 3 years, because that is long-term for the running back position. And that is all that I've got for this team. Now, if you want to, you can go ahead and skip to the end of the video where I talk about the best picks or ranking the draft classes, or you can stick around through the other 3 teams that I'm going to go through here that are your division rivals. But it is the end of the video where we will be talking about the class as a whole and giving the whole draft class a grade. Next up here is the Indianapolis Colts. And this class is a little bit hit or miss for me, as you can kind of see with the grades here. There's some good, some quite bad, just if I'm being honest with you, and also some average and slightly below average, slightly above average. There's a lot of a mix in terms of grades here. So let's go ahead and run through that real quick. Your first pick, 15th overall, you guys selected Laiatu Latu, an edge rusher out of UCLA. I had a top 20 grade on him. I really liked Latu coming out. It was not a surprise to me that he was the first edge rusher off the board. I know everybody lost their minds because Dallas Turner wasn't the first edge rusher taken. I don't think Dallas Turner is as good of a scheme fit for you guys as Laiatu Latu. I think Laiatu Latu fits that defense much better. So I think that's partially why they took Latu over him. But also, I just had Latu graded higher than Dallas Turner anyway. So I probably just would have taken Latu over him regardless of scheme, because I do think Latu is the better prospect than Dallas Turner, which I know is kind of crazy for some minds to think about. Your second round selection, 52nd overall, I have absolutely no idea how he fell this far, but Adani or A.D. Mitchell was your draft pick here. This is an A-plus pick. This might be the best pick of the entire draft, in my opinion. I believe A.D. Mitchell was in my top 15 players in the draft class, just period, regardless of position. I had a top 20 grade on him. It was almost a top 10 grade. It was close. I could grade him like 98.8 something, which a 99.00 would be the threshold to get into the top 10. So he was really close to having a top 10 grade for me. I really like A.D. Mitchell, and more than that, I love the fit on this team. Because he is someone who I think can stretch the field and be the deep threat. But also he is someone who could also be, a power forward and post it up and go up and get those jump balls. A.D. Mitchell is a phenomenal pick for this team. I think it's going to help your quarterback grow. I think it's going to help your team win day one. It would not surprise me if A.D. Mitchell ended up being your best wide receiver by year 2, even though Michael Pittman is pretty good himself. Now, your next selection, I can't really say a whole lot about. I do not like this selection at all. You guys, 79th overall, you guys selected Matt Goncalves, an offensive tackle out of Pitt. A, I'm not sure he's an offensive tackle at the next level. B, I had a 5th round grade on him as an offensive tackle. Now, potentially he could end up moving inside, but that's a conversation for another day and a different time. However, I did have him graded as an offensive tackle. He was a 5th round grade, and there were 4 players on the board here at this pick that I had graded significantly higher than him as an offensive tackle. This is a reach to me, and it's like a pretty bad reach, in my opinion. I don't necessarily see upside from on day 1 with Goncalves, and I don't necessarily see a whole lot of upside beyond a below-average starter for him after year 1 as we get into his career. To me, he was always going to be a depth piece and maybe like a swing tackle sort of best-case scenario with him. I don't get it at all. I would not have made that selection. I probably would have taken someone else. Your 4th round selection was Tanner Bortolini, an interior offensive lineman out of Wisconsin. Big time athlete. You can see it on the film at Wisconsin. This is not someone who has a whole lot of technique right now, but he is a very, very good athlete. I think you're going to sit him for a year or two behind, I think Ryan Kelly is still there at the center position, and then he likely is your long-term replacement for him going forward at that center position. And you don't see athletes like him come out for the offensive lineman very often. A big, big, big time athlete. Your next selection, Anthony Gould, a wide receiver out of Oregon State University. I believe I had a 7th round grade on him. He's just fast. I think you drafted Antonio Pierce, but smaller. I don't get the obsession with guys that are only fast that this team appears to have. The grade is a C+ for me. This is another big reach. However, Jalen Simpson, cornerback out of Auburn. I actually like this pick. I had a 4th round grade on Jalen Simpson. I actually was significantly higher than most people on both of the Auburn corners. So I like Jalen Simpson a lot here. Micah Abraham, I had a 6th round grade on him. I think he's a depth piece. I think he's someone that's probably going to provide some value as a special teams player as well. That is a B. However, Jonah Lalu, an interior defensive lineman out of Oklahoma, I had a non-priority undrafted free agent grade, or just an undrafted free agent grade. This is not someone I would have had even on the board to potentially maybe get drafted. Like if I was doing a top 300 prospects, there's only 250 picks. He probably wouldn't have been in the top 300 guys. Maybe he works out. I don't know. I don't like it that much. But you guys did have some picks that I really, really liked. I like Laiatu Latu. I love A.D. Mitchell for this team, and well as Tanner Bortolini and Jalen Simpson. I like all of those picks. I think that they are going to have the ability to offer this team something, maybe even year one, for some of the later guys drafted here. But in years to come, I think this draft will pay dividends. And that is all that I have for the Indianapolis Colts in this section of the video. If you want to go ahead and skip to the end, you can see my best picks. A.D. Mitchell will be there, spoiler alert. But you can also go to the overall draft rankings section that I have of this video at the very, very end to see what I think about as the draft class as a whole. Moving on to Jacksonville. I'm actually going to go on a bit of a tangent to start this. So I kind of just been doing for the graphics for this, I've kind of just been throwing the team colors on here and then just kind of leaving it there. That was pretty much all I've been doing. And then I do my sort of blue color that I like. That's just my favorite color for the actual grades. Put a little contrast in there. I was hoping I was going to be able to use teal for this. And I guess I still could have. But since 2013, your official colors have just been black and gold. And I didn't know that. Like, I thought teal was still an official color. That is not the case. What the hell's up with that, man? Why'd you get rid of teal? Why is it black? I don't know, man. I think it's kind of crazy. But the teal jerseys are elite, and teal, just as a color, is elite. And also, I think you still wear teal as your jersey color at home. I don't know. Some of these decisions that these owners are making just make no goddamn sense to me. Anyway, let's go ahead and end that tangent there and talk about the actual draft class here. Brian Thomas was one of my favorite players in this entire draft class. I love Brian Thomas. Like, Brian Thomas was maybe my favorite player in the entire draft class just from being my favorite player. But I had a top 10 grade on Brian Thomas, which was significantly higher than most people. Most people were not on board with Brian Thomas being like a top 10 pick like I had him graded. But I love Brian Thomas Jr. I think he's going to add to this team something that it's never had, maybe in the entire history of the franchise. That's a legitimate number one wide receiver that cannot be covered by anybody other than an elite corner. I genuinely think Brian Thomas is that guy. This pick is an A- for me. You got tremendous value with this selection. Your second round pick, 48th overall, you selected Mason Smith, an interior defensive lineman out of LSU. Man, if he could have stayed healthy, I'm not sure he's here at pick 48. But he didn't stay healthy, so you got him at pick 48. This is a classic second round risk. And generally speaking, players that have the kind of film that Mason Smith has don't last until the second round. Like, he's got first round film and he's got first round athletic traits. And normally those two things mean you're going in the first round. However, the X factor is always injuries. So it could work out great where he can stay healthy and he is that guy. But also, generally speaking, hurt players in college are hurt players in the NFL. And it's because of those injury concerns that I had him graded as a top 75 pick, meaning his value would be from pick 51 to pick 75. So this is a tad bit of a reach, not that big of a deal, but I do have to grade it a B- because it is, in fact, a reach. Jarrian Jones, you took at 96th overall. I think this is an immediate contributor in your secondary, potentially on the outside, but I think probably more likely in the slot. I like Jarrian Jones. I did, in fact, have a top 100 grade on him. That makes this a pick at value, so the grade is a B. Your first of two fourth-round selections, 114th overall, was Javon Foster, an offensive tackle out of Missouri. I was not a particularly big fan of Javon Foster. I had a sixth-round grade on him as an offensive tackle. This is a little bit of a reach, in my opinion, but I don't think it's necessarily the worst thing in the world. Maybe he could end up being a pretty decent starter, but I don't see a whole lot of upside with him. Or your other fourth-round selection, 116th overall, Jordan Jefferson, a nose tackle out of LSU. Generally speaking, I'm not a big fan of nose tackles just in general. I think there's only probably 5, maybe 6 nose tackles in the NFL that can play more than one down and not be a negative influence on your defense. And there's currently only one nose tackle that is definitively a positive influence in the passing game, and that's Dexter Lawrence. However, Jordan Jefferson is not going to be a Dexter Lawrence type of player, and you're not going to ask him to be that. As far as a, one down, we're pretty sure they're going to run the ball here, sort of rotational player. I think he has some upside doing that. I'm just lower on those types of players than the NFL is. I had a 6th-round grade on him as a nose tackle, and you guys took him in the 4th, so the grade is a C+. In the 5th round, you went ahead and added another corner, this time on the outside, in DeAndre Prince, a corner out of Ole Miss. He's a really good athlete, an underrated athlete, I think, in terms of just athletes that we talk about in this class. He is a bit of a project, but I actually had a 4th-round grade on him because, generally speaking, the 4th round is where I look to take those guys that have all the tools, but probably need to sit for 2 years or maybe even 3 years before they can end up being a every down sort of contributor. And I think DeAndre Prince does have that kind of upside, but he is someone who's going to, early on in his career, probably just be a special teams player, kind of buried in the depth chart of the cornerback room, where he can sit and learn for a while. Up next is a pick that I am very much not a fan of, and that is Texas running back Keelan Robinson. He was like the 5th best running back on Texas's roster this past year, was not good, and Texas had a borderline top 5 offensive line last year in all of college football, and he just wasn't good. I had a undrafted free agent grade, which is the lowest grade that you can give him. that I can give a player that is on Keelan Robinson. You took him in the 5th round, and you already have 2 running backs that I'm very confident are going to be contributors in Tank Bigsley and ETN. I don't remember if it's Travis or Trevor. I don't remember which one's which, but he's not even really going to be a contributor. I think there were a lot of other players that you could have taken here that could have added to your offense or your defense or even special teams, because I don't think Keelan Robinson offers you anything in any phase of the game right now. Cam Little, kicker out of Arkansas, I'm fine with it. Yeah, it is what it is. Kickers, you draft them. Some people want to draft them. Some people don't want to draft them. The fact of the matter is that there are not 32 NFL caliber kickers in the NFL. And if Cam Little is an NFL caliber kicker, then getting him in the 6th round is a good deal. So if he ends up being good, then it's a good pick. I just gave it a B, a pick at value. I'm perfectly fine taking kickers and punters in the 5th, 6th, 7th round. And if there's someone that I really, really think is going to be really, really, really good, maybe the 4th round as well. But took him in the 6th round, not the end of the world. Miles Cole was your last pick, an edge rusher out of Texas Tech. Does have some athletic and injury concerns. Not a lot of production at Texas Tech either, but he's got the frame to be an NFL edge rusher. He's got the traits, so to speak. So kind of taking a shot in the dark there. I did actually have a draftable grade on him. I had a 7th round grade on him. So that gave that pick a B. And that is all that I have for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Overall, I liked the class. If you want to know the grade that I have for this class, you can go ahead and skip to the end of the video where I talk about that. Or you can stick around through the final AFC South team, and then after that I'm going to talk about the best picks of the draft, and Brian Thomas Jr. will be there, so you can look forward to that. Otherwise, you can just go ahead and skip to the end and see what I think about your draft class as a whole. Moving on to the last AFC South team here, we have the Tennessee Titans. This one was a interesting class because your worst pick, in my opinion, was your first pick. And we'll go ahead and just jump right into it. I did not like J.C. Latham like a lot of other people liked J.C. Latham. I think the NFL probably had him as consensus offensive tackle too, which I think is ludicrous. But I'm not in the NFL, so maybe I'm wrong. However, when I watched J.C. Latham, I saw a 6'8", 360-pound player that routinely got beat on power rushes. And yes, dominant in the run game, the best run blocker in this class, regardless of position. But he struggled with speed, which even the J.C. Latham supporters typically admit that that will be a problem. But he got beat on power rushes consistently. You can see it most obviously in the Michigan game. And the best example of him just absolutely getting his ass handed to him was the final play of that game when Josiah Stewart, a 6'2", 235-pound defensive end, who's given up 130-plus pounds to J.C. Latham, pushed his ass backwards 5 yards and blew up the play in the backfield. J.C. Latham was not my number 2 tackle in this class. I think he was number 8. I had a top 40 grade on him. This is a really, really big reach for me. And also on top of that, I'm not, generally speaking, a big fan of moving right tackles to the left side. There are not many cases in the NFL where that ends up working out. There are some cases of moving a left tackle to a right tackle and it working out, but there are almost no cases. Like, I can't even think of one off the top of my head where a right tackle moved to left tackle and ended up being really good. The most famous one, at least the most recent one that comes to mind, is Jedrick Willis, who was a right tackle at, ironically, Alabama, and moved to left tackle in the NFL for the Cleveland Browns. And he's okay. He's not one of the top 10 left tackles in the NFL. He's probably, honestly, not even top 15 for me. Like, I think he's okay. Like, he's maybe even like a below average sort of starter. He's not good by any stretch of the imagination. But I think if he had stayed at right tackle in the NFL, then I think he probably would have had a really good chance to have a much better career than he's had so far. And I could see a similar sort of situation with J.C. Latham here as well. Latham, I think, has much higher upside just from an athletic standpoint than Jedrick Willis, but not a big fan of the pick, not a big fan of the fit either in terms of moving him from right tackle to left tackle, because that's what you're doing, which is, I just think that's crazy. I can't get over that. That's not a good idea, in my opinion. However, they are doing what everybody in the NFL is doing right now, which is they're getting bigger on the offensive line, and they're going to power run game. That's the new vogue in the NFL, because we're going down to 220-pound linebackers. So like, we're just going to run directly at them now, because football is just a giant circle. So anyway, I've spent enough time talking about J.C. Latham. Let's go ahead and move on to your second round selection, T'Vondre Sweat, a nose tackle out of Texas. If you watched my previous section here with the Jacksonville Jaguars, I kind of went in on the nose tackle position a bit. And generally speaking, yes, there's not a whole lot that a nose tackle can do to actually impact the game of football, at least the way that it's played in the modern game of football now. With the NFL shifting to a more power run focused game, nose tackles are probably going to become more valuable than they have been for the past 15 to 20 years when it's been a passing league. So in the long run, this pick might end up looking better than it looks to me right now. But I do think it is just slightly a reach. So the grade is a B minus because of that. I had a top 50 grade on T'Vondre Sweat, meaning his value, quote unquote, would be from 41 to 50. So this is a little bit of a reach, just a tad bit of a reach, in my opinion. However, I do actually think he has some upside in the pass game as a pocket pusher, someone to where he can make a play if an edge rusher forces the quarterback to step up in the pocket, and then maybe he can kind of just walk into a sack because he's not going backwards. I think that's the kind of role he's likely to have as a pass rusher in the NFL. And I think at day one, he's going to be a borderline dominant run defender. So it's a good pick. It's a solid pick. I gave it a B minus. However, getting Cedric Gray in the fourth round is a fantastic steal for me. I had a top 75 grade on Cedric Gray out of North Carolina. I really like Cedric Gray. I think he has big time upside as an athlete. I think he's big enough to survive the what could potentially become the new modern NFL in terms of the power run game and everything like that. I think he's got enough mass on him to be able to survive if the league ends up becoming a downhill type of league. However, I also think he's athletic enough to survive if the league stays in what it is now, which is this passing-centric league where your linebackers have to be able to cover tight ends and potentially slot receivers and running backs out of the backfield. Otherwise, they're just going to get exploited and picked on. So I really liked Cedric Gay. I think he has a ton of upside, and this is a really, really good pick. The grade is an A for me. Your next pick in the fifth round was Jarvis Brownlee, a corner out of Louisville. And Louisville was one of the teams this year that I actually watched quite a bit of in terms of like actually watching college football, because they just happened to kind of be a semi-interesting team that was on when there wasn't really any other interesting games. And I really liked Jarvis Brownlee. I had a fourth round grade on him. He is a little bit of a project in my opinion. However, I think this is a starting caliber secondary piece. Could potentially be on the outside as a corner, could potentially be in the slot, could potentially see him move to safety as well. Not really sure where that fit is going to be at the next level, but I really like the player, and I also really like the fit in Tennessee now. Jaquan Jackson was your 6th round selection, a wide receiver out of Tulane. This was a lot of people's like favorite gem in this year's draft class, where everyone's like, oh man, this guy's going to go in early day 3 or potentially late day 2, and he's really going to surprise people with how good he is. And I watched him and I was like, I don't know about that. I ended up having a 5th round grade on him, so I was a little bit lower on him than most people. I feel like most people were talking about him going in like the 3rd or 4th round. I ended up having a 5th round grade on him. That being said, I do think he has upside as a slot receiver. I think he potentially as a special teams player as well. Maybe a returner, but probably not in that role. I think you probably just have better options at that position. But in terms of actually like running down the field and being an athlete on kickoff, which is important now, or potentially on a punt team, I think he could potentially have some upside in that role as well. Gave the grade a B+ because it is a pick after value. Your first of 2 7th round selections, 242nd overall, you selected James Williams, a linebacker out of Miami. This is a special teams pick. I think he's got a decent amount of upside in that role. The grade is a B. I did have a 7th round grade on him because I just had a lot of linebackers in like the 5th, 6th, 7th round of this year's draft class for whatever reason. I don't really know why, but I didn't really like this linebacker class all that much. Your last selection, 252nd overall, was Jalen Harrell, an edge rusher out of Michigan. And as a Michigan fan, I am familiar with Jalen Harrell. I had a 6th round grade on him. I think he's a better athlete than people give him credit for. I think he is someone who could potentially drop into space and play a little bit there if you wanted to do some zone blitzes or stuff like that. But mainly, I also think he's got upside to be able to be a special teams player and probably could end up being a rotational caliber edge rusher in the NFL. Michigan had so many edge rushers this past year that he didn't really get the amount of consistent reps that I feel like he could have gotten on a team that didn't have as much talent as Michigan did this past season. However, I still like the pick. It's a pick after value. The grade is a B+. Moving on here now to the best picks section of this video here. These are the best and also some of my most favorite picks from these 4 teams. At the top of the list, we have Adonai Mitchell, or A.D. Mitchell, or honestly, Adonai. I don't really know which is the correct pronunciation. I've just kind of fallen back on Adonai. I don't really know why, but I've just chosen that is the way that I'm going to say it. But anyway, he was the only A+ in this video. Love that pick for the Colts. Cedric Gray for the Titans is up next, and he was, I believe, the only A grade in this video. And then Kalen Bullock for the Texans and Brian Thomas Jr. for the Jaguars were A-, and Jarvis Brownlee and Jalen Simpson were 2 of my favorite B+ selections in these 4 teams here. These were the best picks for this division in this year's NFL draft, in my opinion. The last thing that we're going to be talking about today is, of course, the ranking of all 4 of the classes. And these classes, these 4 teams, didn't really do a whole lot to separate themselves from me. It was kind of like everybody had one really good pick, and then everybody had kind of one really bad pick as well. So I've got Tennessee and Indianapolis graded with a B, and I have Jacksonville and Houston graded with a B-. I don't think any of them were particularly bad. I think they all got players that will be able to help their teams in the long run, and players that are going to make an instant impact. But what do I know, after all? Because I'm just some asshole on the internet giving you his opinion. And it's at this point that I would like to remind you to like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more content like this, And if you disagreed with me at any point, to go ahead and leave a comment down in the comment section below. And now with the intro done and out of the way, there's only one thing left to say, and that's that I'll see you next time.